This is the youngest country in the world. Welcome to South Sudan, home to the world's biggest UN mission, a country on its knees after years of war. And chances are, you've never even heard of it.
It's not hot.
After a quick screening for Ebola, I arrived at the hotel in Juba, the capital city. And this is going to be a slightly different episode of Access because the government here, they don't like cameras. Even though we've got all the right paperwork from the media house here in Juba, it's just about trying to stay out of any conflict from police and army, that sort of thing. Juba seems like almost any other African city. Business as usual. But there's still signs of the civil war that continues to threaten peace in South Sudan. Driving around, you notice unfinished buildings. They're what investors left behind when fighting broke out in the city.
But a lot of the fighting happened just around here, which is the centre of Juba, very close to diplomatic missions, very close to embassies, residential places. So everybody got very scared. Took about, I think, 2 or 3 days for it to calm down. And then flights came in from the American military from all over the place to get people out. And of course the worry is, will it all happen again? So you look on the right-hand side, you see bullet smacks in the walls, and the same on the left-hand side.
The UN has had a mission here since 2011, but it hasn't stopped widespread violence and civil war. After South Sudan's war for independence from Sudan, the country has struggled to form a functioning democratic government. The Second Sudanese Civil War, as it's known, lasted for 22 years, between 1983 and 2005. And it's one of the longest civil wars on record. It resulted in independence for South Sudan, 6 years after the war ended. But independence didn't bring peace. In December 2013, South Sudan's President Kiir accused his former deputy, Riek Machar, and 10 others of attempting a coup d'etat. It ignited another brutal civil war, with the Sudan People's Liberation Movement on one side and the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition on the other. There are also ethnic undertones. The two politicians represent the country's two largest ethnic groups, the Dinka and the Nuer. Both have been accused of targeting each other in the war, with atrocities committed by both sides. This national violence and other widespread tribal conflicts have plagued South Sudan's start as a new country. It's estimated that some 400,000 people have been killed and millions more displaced, facing starvation. The real victim of the latest conflict are civilians, who became targets based on their ethnicity, many fleeing the country and thousands of others turning to the UN for safety. In the quiet embassy compound in Juba, I had time to interview one of the locally hired workers.
So people thought to seek the refuge in churches, school, and hospital. They were found vulnerable, and they were all killed, massacred in church. So it was really pretty bad. And that's when my grandmother was killed. She was 90s. She has nothing to do with the politics. And my grandfather from my mother's side was killed. He was similar 90s as well. And I was in front line by then. And I had to go and bury him and bury my grandmother. People were killing people which are not supposed to be killed. You have to kill the combatant, not the civilian, not the elders, not the children, and not the women.
Robert was a soldier in South Sudan's army, joining up as a child for a chance at education.
You were told to either join or any belonging for your family will be taken because there was only survival. So you have to join the army to survive. You join also to get the education. You join In order, if you've grown up to become of the age of 18 and above, then you can fight. I joined in 1999, so when I was about 14. So it was about a child soldier, living as a child soldier.
The next morning, we took a trip out of Juba to a UN compound. So this is UN House, and despite the name, it's actually more of a compound. It's a huge compound just outside of Juba, the capital city. And this is where the British Army has a number of staff officers based here for Op Vogel.
The UN mission in South Sudan, known as UNMISS, is the largest UN mission worldwide currently. It is primarily protection of civilians in South Sudan in the mission, of which UK contributes 8 personnel, military staff officers in an operation called Op Vogel. The majority of the military work in an element called Force, which contributes to the UN mission at every level from mission down through to sector level, and does the majority of the force protection and all the patrolling. However, the active element within all the UN mission is primarily civilian, with all the non-governmental organisations actually making the difference on the ground itself, and the force elements just making sure that they're in a safe and secure environment and giving them force protection so they can get on and do their business.
Also expect takeoff time to 9 o'clock, not you coming early.
We're on time.
Next, we boarded a UN plane and took off over the White Nile, flying north. After landing, we went to see some of the Bangladeshi Navy deployed here to protect barges. Due to the country's lack of roads, a key way for goods and resources to be moved north of Juba is by barge. But they're prone to being attacked and looted. So we're just flowing up, following the Nile all the way up to Malakal from Juba. And just had a little visit to the Bangladeshi Navy. Just down the road is where the UK contingent are based in Malakal. For the past 4 years, there's been 300 personnel deployed to the UN mission in South Sudan. Known to British soldiers as Op Trenton, it was the UK's largest UN mission, with personnel deployed to Malakal and Bentiu. The UK has 2 operations out here at the moment, Op Vogel and Op Trenton. The personnel on Op Trenton have now returned to the UK, with the operation ending. But they'd been building 2 hospitals and upgraded local infrastructure, including schools, prisons, and bridges.
Seeing the whole task force buy into the need to get the hospital finished before we leave has seen pretty much everybody, force protection, our J6 signallers, our logisticians lend a hand. We've had to sift all of the resources, the sand and the aggregate, to remove the impurities so that we can get the concrete to the right standard, and everybody's been down there either sifting sand, sifting aggregate, and that to me shows the one team effort for Op Trenton.
As it turns out, a UN engineering task group is slightly removed from the country itself. It isn't a simple case of deploying on the ground to improve infrastructure for civilians. It's a task group there to help the UN peacekeeper force. So the hospitals aren't for the people of South Sudan. They're there to be used by the UN troops deployed here, enabling them to go out and deliver peacekeeping operations. So we're in the UK camp now in Malakal, which is a little bit separate to the rest of the UN compound. And just over that pesco wall behind me is the protection of civilians camp. These protection camps have been here since the start of the Civil War. In an unprecedented attempt to save lives, the UN opened its gates to civilians who were fleeing the killings that were engulfing the nation.
There is a strong feeling about to whom does Malakal, which is viewed as the capital, belong to. There is an undertone of an ethnic dynamic between the ethnic groups, and we have 3 ethnic groups here in Upper Nile, amongst 3 main groups. It's the Dinka, the Shuluk, and the Nuer. And there is a feeling between both the Shuluk and the Dinka that Malakal town, which is where we are here today, belongs to one of the ethnic groups. And that is the undercurrent of the ethnic dynamic.
Even now, major towns are in ruins, emptied of most of their inhabitants, and ghost neighbourhoods stretch on and on in settlements across the country. What did he say?
He stuck his finger up and tried to fuck you. Yeah. Some days the local kids will be nice to you, but some days it's quite challenging for the British troops because the kids might throw stones at you, for example. It's quite bad for our British troops to see, but they sometimes throw dead dogs over the wall, over the gate. Well, let's face it, South Sudan is it's the top poorest place in the world. So it's pretty much because the kids are bored, they don't have nothing to do. They haven't, been brought up. They've basically got nothing, they don't know less.
Although the UK's function wasn't to help the people in these camps directly, personnel on Op Trenton had been running outreach programmes to try and help some of the people living just outside their gates. Women in these camps face a threat of sexual violence, so UK personnel upgraded 16 kilometres of roads so they can safely travel to collect food and water. And in a building on the edge of the site in Malakal, they even put on self-defence classes, along with training on women's rights. Just down the road, on the White Nile, another project helped fishermen from nearby villages build floating jetties so that they have easy access to their boats. Op Trenton ended officially in February 2020, before they packed up and handed the engineering task group over to UN personnel from the Pakistani army. The UK's contribution to the UN mission in South Sudan seems a world away from the other high-level national problems in the country. But it has been helping on a macro level. It's been the UK's largest deployment of UK military peacekeepers in 2 decades. And as Op Trenton ends, and those peacekeepers return from South Sudan, a new task force is preparing to deploy to the UN mission in Mali. It'll be a very different operation. After watching the medal parade in Malakal, we flew back to Juba.
What makes me too proud of this country is the culture, the diversity of the people in this country. We have 64 tribes in this country. We are so rich in culture. We have so many resources in this country. We have a beautiful Nile. So to be a South Sudanese makes me proud. And I'm always proud of my country, seeing that flag flying high. I don't want to see this country failing again, to be a failed state. I just want it to be a prosperous country.
Before the Civil War broke out, Robert had actually been sent to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst in the UK.
Until now, if you go to Sandhurst, you can still got my name on the list of South Sudan. It gave me that energy that why not? I can do it, to be the first proud South Sudanese to this school. And that's given me a lot of hope. It wasn't necessary for the people of South Sudan, after they just gained independence in 2011, to fight in 2013, 2 years after. The young generation, us, are the people have been affected by this war, because we were trying to have an identity of the nation as a people, as a 64 tribe, and then to be one people and one nation that we are proud of and which we have fought for the last 50 years as to have the independent country called South Sudan.
And we'll make sure that you... This doesn't completely mark the end of UK troops in South Sudan. The much smaller Operation Vogel continues, and the UK's embassy in Juba will keep working closely with the South Sudanese government and the United Nations here. Whether that will help bring a lasting, positive change to the country, who knows? But just after my visit, some progress was made. After months of delays and deadlock, bitter rivals Salva Kiir and Riek Machar finally reached an agreement, forming a unity government in South Sudan.
I want to assure you we will work collectively to end your long suffering.
I have forgiven my brother, Dr. Riek Machar, and I also ask for his forgiveness.
It's a fragile deal, and bringing the South Sudanese people together will take generations. But it's a start. South Sudan is a uniquely beautiful place, and I hope that the short time I spent along the White Nile doesn't have to be my last. Thanks for watching this episode of Access. We've got lots more videos like this on our channel, and I've uploaded Robert's full interview. His story is incredible. The link to that is in the description.